She thought no one would ever hear her story, but now you have. Subscribe to give voice to others like her. My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and I never thought I'd be sharing this story with anyone. But what happened to me at Meridian? Financial changed everything I believed about justice, power, and the unexpected ways life can surprise you. I still remember walking into that boardroom, 6 months pregnant, feeling like I was entering a lion's den. My baby bump was impossible to hide anymore, and I could feel every pair of eyes in that room judging me before I even opened my mouth. What I didn't know was that this meeting would become the turning point that would expose everything rotten about that company. It started 3 months earlier when I first told my supervisor, Marcus, about my pregnancy. I was so excited, practically glowing, as I shared the news during our weekly one-on-one meeting. But his reaction wasn't what I expected at all. His face went cold, and he leaned back in his chair like I'd just told him I had a contagious disease. "Well, Sarah," he said, drumming his fingers on his desk, "I guess we'll have to start thinking about your replacement sooner rather than later." I felt my stomach drop. Replacement? "Marcus, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be taking maternity leave, but I'll be back." He gave me this patronizing smile that made my skin crawl. Sure, but let's be realistic here. Once you have that baby, your priorities are going to change. You won't be able to give 100% to this job anymore. That was just the beginning of what would become the worst 3 months of my professional life. But what Marcus didn't know was that someone had been watching everything unfold from the very beginning. Within weeks of announcing my pregnancy, everything started changing. My project assignments got smaller and less important. Meetings that I used to lead were suddenly handed over to junior colleagues with half my experience. When I tried to speak up during team discussions, Marcus would cut me off or dismiss my ideas with a wave of his hand. The worst part wasn't even Marcus himself. It was watching my colleagues, people I considered friends, start to treat me differently. During lunch breaks, they'd make jokes about pregnancy brain when I'd forget small details. They'd roll their eyes when I had to take bathroom breaks during long meetings. Sarah from accounting even had the audacity to suggest that maybe I should consider working part-time for the baby's sake. I tried to document everything, keeping detailed notes of every dismissive comment, every project I was removed from, every meeting I was excluded from. But who was I going to report it to? Marcus was tight with HR, and everyone seemed to think that pushing pregnant women aside was just the way things worked. What I didn't realize was that my detailed documentation would soon become the most important evidence in a case that would shake the entire company. The real breaking point came during a client presentation I'd been working on for months. I developed this innovative investment strategy that could have landed us a $15 million account. But the morning of the presentation, Marcus pulled me aside and told me he was giving my presentation to Jake, a guy he'd been with the company for only 8 months. "Look, Sarah," Marcus said, not even trying to hide his condescension anymore, "you're just not in the right headspace for something this important. Besides, what if you have morning sickness during the presentation? We can't risk embarrassing ourselves in front of the client." I was furious, but I kept my voice steady. "Marcus, I haven't had morning sickness in months, and this is my project. I know every detail of this strategy." He shrugged. "Jake's got it covered. Why don't you focus on some of the smaller administrative tasks? That's probably more your speed right now, anyway." That night, I went home and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. My husband found me on the couch, surrounded by tissues, and I told him everything. He was ready to march into that office and give Marcus a piece of his mind. But I stopped him. I had a better idea. What I decided to do next would change everything, but I had no idea just how dramatically. I decided to document everything more systematically. I started recording our conversations legally, keeping copies of every email, every assignment change, every dismissive comment. I even started noting the times when I was excluded from meetings or when my ideas were attributed to male colleagues. Meanwhile, my work environment was getting worse by the day. Marcus had started making jokes about my condition in front of clients. During one particularly humiliating meeting, he actually patted my belly without permission and said to a client, "Don't mind Sarah, she's got baby brain these days. We're keeping her on easy projects until she figures out what she wants to do with her life." I wanted to scream, to fight back, to do something. But I was 6 months pregnant, financially dependent on this job, and terrified of making things worse. So I smiled, swallowed my rage, and kept documenting everything. The other women in the office weren't much better. Instead of supporting me, they seemed to enjoy watching me get pushed aside. I heard them whispering in the break room about how I was using my pregnancy as an excuse and how I was probably going to quit anyway. So what's the point? But then something happened that nobody saw coming, least of all me. The day of the big quarterly review meeting arrived. This was the meeting where all department heads presented their results to upper management, and typically, as the senior financial analyst, I would have been presenting our department's numbers. But Marcus had made it clear that Jake would be doing the presentation instead. I wasn't even supposed to be in that meeting, but Marcus needed someone to take notes and fetch coffee. So there I was, 6 months pregnant, sitting in the back of the boardroom like some kind of secretary while Jake stumbled through my analysis. The presentation was going terribly. Jake couldn't answer basic questions about the data, and it was obvious he didn't understand the methodology I'd developed. The regional managers looked confused and frustrated. I watched my months of work being butchered, and I could feel my blood pressure rising. Then Marcus made the mistake that would cost him everything. One of the regional managers asked a particularly complex question about risk assessment, and Jake completely froze. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever, and you could feel the tension in the room building. Finally, Marcus jumped in to save him. "Well, you have to understand," Marcus said with a nervous laugh. "This analysis was originally put together by Sarah here." He gestured dismissively toward me in the back corner. "And, well, let's just say her attention to detail hasn't been quite the same since she's been expecting. Pregnancy brain, you know how it is." The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Some of the managers were chuckling, others looked shocked, but they all went along with it. I felt my face burn with humiliation and rage. This was my work, my analysis, my months of research being dismissed because of my pregnancy. But what happened next changed everything. I thought I knew about power and justice. The door to the boardroom opened, and in walked someone I'd only seen in company newsletters and annual reports. Robert Chen, the CEO of our entire company, a man who controlled $1 billion corporation and rarely visited our regional offices. Everyone in the room immediately straightened up, but I was too stunned to move. He looked around the room, his expression unreadable. "I apologize for the interruption," he said quietly. "I was reviewing some quarterly reports and had some questions about the innovative investment strategy that's been generating so much buzz. I believe it originated from this office." Marcus practically leaped out of his chair. "Yes, sir. Jake here has been leading that project. Brilliant work, really innovative thinking." Mr. Chen nodded slowly, then his eyes found mine across the room. "And you are?" I stood up carefully, my hand instinctively going to my baby bump. "Sarah Martinez, sir. Senior financial analyst." Something flickered in his eyes. "Ms. Martinez, I've been very impressed with the methodology outlined in the reports I've been reading, particularly the risk assessment algorithm. Very sophisticated work." Marcus jumped in again. "Well, Jake has really been driving that project, haven't you, Jake?" But Mr. Chun wasn't looking at Jake anymore. He was looking directly at me. Miss Martinez, could you walk me through the theoretical foundation for your risk assessment model? My heart was pounding, but I knew this material like the back of my hand. For the next 10 minutes, I explained every aspect of the strategy I'd developed, answering his detailed questions with confidence and precision. The room was dead silent except for my voice and his occasional follow-up questions. When I finished, Mr. Chun was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Marcus. Mr. Thompson, could I speak with you privately, along with Miss Martinez? What happened in that private meeting would be seared into my memory forever. As soon as the door closed behind us, Mr. Chun's entire demeanor changed. He looked at Marcus with an expression of cold fury that made me take a step back. Mr. Thompson, he said, his voice deadly quiet, would you care to explain to me why you've been taking credit for Ms. Martinez's work? Marcus started stammering excuses about team collaboration and shared projects, but Mr. Chun cut him off. I've been following this investment strategy for months through the reports that cross my desk. Every innovation, every breakthrough, every piece of brilliant analysis has had Ms. Martinez's name on the original documentation. Yet somehow, when I walk into that boardroom, I find her sitting in the corner taking notes while someone else presents her work. My legs felt weak. I hadn't known that my work was reaching the CEO level, that he'd been following my analysis specifically, but he wasn't done. And then, to add insult to injury, I heard you dismiss her intellectual capabilities because of her pregnancy. In front of a room full of managers, you reduced months of exceptional work to pregnancy brain. Marcus tried to defend himself, but Mr. Chun raised his hand to stop him. Mr. Thompson, not only have you been engaging in pregnancy discrimination, which is illegal, but you've been stealing credit from one of the most talented analysts this company has. Ms. Martinez's work has already generated over $20 million in new revenue for this company. I felt like I was in a dream. $20 million. My strategy had been that successful. Then Mr. Chun turned to me and his expression softened. Ms. Martinez, I owe you an apology. This company failed you, and that's unacceptable. I'd like to discuss how we can make this right. What he offered me next was beyond anything I could have imagined. First, Mr. Chun said, Mr. Thompson will be terminated immediately. Second, I am promoting you to Regional Director of Financial Strategy. Third, we're implementing a company-wide review of pregnancy discrimination policies, and you'll be heading that initiative. And fourth, you'll be receiving the full bonus credit for the revenue your strategy has generated, along with a formal apology from this company. I could barely process what I was hearing. Regional Director? That was 3 levels above my current position. Marcus's face had gone white, and he was opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. But Mr. Chun wasn't finished. Ms. Martinez, your maternity leave will be fully paid at your new salary level, and when you return, you'll have a dedicated team and a budget to implement your strategies company-wide. Your work deserves to be recognized at the level it merits. I started crying right there in that conference room. Months of humiliation, discrimination, and having my work stolen had led to this moment of complete vindication. As we walked back to the main conference room, Mr. Chun addressed the entire group. I want everyone to understand something very Clearly, Ms. Martinez has just been promoted to Regional Director of Financial Strategy. Her innovative work has generated over $20 million for this company, and anyone who has a problem with that can discuss it with HR. The look on my colleagues' faces was priceless. The same people who had been making jokes about pregnancy brain were now staring at me with a mixture of shock and newfound respect. But the best part came later that afternoon. As word spread through the office about my promotion and Marcus's, termination, something beautiful happened. 3 other women in the company came forward with their own stories of discrimination. It turned out that Marcus had been systematically pushing aside pregnant women and mothers for years, and my case had given them the courage to speak up. Within 6 months, the company had completely overhauled their parental leave policies, implemented mandatory bias training for all managers, and established a confidential reporting system for discrimination. My experience had sparked a company-wide transformation. Today, 2 years later, I'm not just the regional director anymore. I've been promoted to vice president of innovation, and the strategy I developed while being dismissed for pregnancy brain has generated over $100 million in revenue for the company. My daughter, Emma, is now 18 months old, and she comes to the office with me sometimes. When she does, people smile and wave, treating her like the little princess she is. It's hard to believe that the same workplace that once mocked my pregnancy now celebrates working mothers. I still have the notebook where I documented every instance of discrimination, every dismissive comment, every stolen idea. Sometimes I flip through it to remind myself how far I've come, but mostly I keep it as a reminder that documentation and persistence can overcome even the worst workplace injustice. The most ironic part of this entire story: Marcus was fired for discrimination, but he was also fired for gross incompetence. It turned out that my pregnancy brain had been single-handedly carrying his department's performance for years. After he left, they needed to hire 2 people to replace the work I'd been doing. Looking back, I realized that day when the CEO walked into that boardroom wasn't just a coincidence. He'd been reviewing my work for months, watching my analysis generate millions in revenue while my name was being systematically erased from presentations and credit. He knew exactly what was happening, and he'd been waiting for the right moment to address it. The company that once laughed at my baby bump now uses my story in their diversity training programs. I've spoken at conferences about pregnancy discrimination and workplace equity, and every time I tell this story, I see women in the audience taking notes, documenting their own experiences, finding their own courage to fight back. My baby bump, the thing that was supposed to make me weak and unreliable, became the catalyst for the most successful period of my career. Those people who laughed at me were really laughing at their own ignorance, their own inability to see past their biases to recognize talent and innovation. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't kept those detailed records. If I hadn't been in that boardroom that day, if the CEO hadn't chosen that moment to visit. But then I realized that justice has a way of finding the light, especially when you refuse to give up on yourself. Emma's first word wasn't mama or dada, it was work. And when she said it, she was sitting in my office, surrounded by the financial reports and strategic analyses that had changed our lives forever. I laughed when I heard it, remembering how they used to say I'd lose focus once I became a mother. The truth is, becoming a mother didn't make me less capable. It made me unstoppable.